Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. Broadcasting throughout the United Kingdom and around the world, we are bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. across all our digital platforms, including YouTube, including Facebook, including Twitter, and including TikTok. And if you're watching on TikTok, folks, the best experience will be had on our YouTube channel, but we will be here on TikTok for the next hour. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Please join us there or stay on and listen and send in your questions, please. And that goes for everybody. Send in any questions or any comments that you've got, because we love to hear from you and we love to answer your questions and we love to interact with you. Supporters and people who might be skeptical, do send us in your comments. And please also share, because that's so important. If you can share the message via TikTok or share via Facebook or share via YouTube or retweet on Twitter, if you can retweet with a positive quote tweet, then we'll see that and we will retweet you, and we will retweet you and your comment to 27,000 people. So that helps you as well. It's a win-win for us all. So please do share, folks, and please help us to get the message out. Nice to see Cheesester71 in TikTok. Yes, are we in the 1960s? Well, what a great decade that was, and also the 70s and 80s as well. And of course, every decade is a great decade here in our wonderful United Kingdom. Regardless of how things appear to be going, we have to remember that we can keep the light shining, each of us as individuals, every day. And we look out at the world via the frame that is sold to us via the mass media, and sometimes we might get depressed. But you've got to know that in the end of the day, everything's going to work out for the best. Paul says, good evening, fellow patriots. Good evening. Anything on your mind tonight, Paul, or anybody else, when we look out at things? Now, Twigman says he loves the Falklands flag. I want to give a shout out to the chap who sent us that flag. It's the Falklands flag. Well, it's the United Kingdom flag, obviously, with the Falklands coat of arms emblazoned over it. And that's a ram on a grassy knoll beside the water. And the ship there is the Desire. And the Desire was the name of the ship that was captained by John Davis when he first sighted the Falklands, or the Falklands Islands, back in 1592. And the motto there is desire the right. Now, I made a wee bit of an error last week because I said, because I wondered what right was being desired there. It was desire the right to what, I thought, in my modernistic way. But of course, as soon as the programme ended and I thought about it again, I realised it doesn't mean anything to do with like the modern concept of rights. It's righteousness. It's desire that which is right. Desire that which is righteous. That's what's meant by that phrase, desire the right, which occurred to me when the programme ended. So I thought I must say that next week. It's desire that which is right. And it's shortened simply to a 3-word, desire the right. That's what that's all about. As Sue says, can Sturgeon legally allow 16-year-olds to stand in Scottish elections? If she passes a law, yes, she certainly will be able to do that. Now, that's not the case at the moment. 16-year-olds can, of course, as we know, vote at Scottish Holyrood elections and at Scottish council elections. And they can do so because the franchise and everything related to electoral law was devolved to Scotland in the Scotland Act 2018. And that happened, of course, because when we won the referendum, the stupid government in Westminster in charge thought, right, rather than giving us guys some kind of reward, rather than strengthening the United Kingdom as a consequence of that vote, what we'll do is we'll try to weaken the United Kingdom even further. We'll give the people who lost everything that essentially they wanted, and somehow that will appease the tiger that's roaming around. But of course it doesn't, it just makes it hungrier. And so that is what was given to them. They, along with lots and lots of other things, they were given the right to control electoral law. So to answer your question, Sue, yeah, if they want, they can allow 16-year-olds to stand for election at Scottish elections, to Holyrood, and at council elections. Now, it'd be a very strange 16-year-old who would want to do that at the end of the day, so it might not make that much difference. And at the end of the day, would people vote for a 16-year-old who's still in school as well? Sounds very strange, really. The Scottish National Party have a strange dichotomy here, because out of one side of their mouth, they're trying to infantilise young people for as long as possible. Such as, for example, and I don't know too much about it, but this idea of 25-year-olds not having full legal capacity, absurd things like that. Not other things that they're things that in the past you would have been considered an adult to do. Now they're trying to extend that period of childhood almost. But out the other side of their mouth, they're forcing young people into adult roles. So there's a whole dichotomy there which doesn't make any sense when viewed objectively. One part of them wants to infantilize young people, the other part wants to thrust them into adult roles before they're really at a stage to do that. So who knows how that'll work out, but they've certainly got the power to do that. Yes, Kenny says that the age of responsibility is 26. That's totally absurd, isn't it? Totally absurd. Oh my, especially when basically all the crimes that you commit. If people are going to commit crimes, they usually do it when they're young and silly. And getting into fights and all that sort of stuff, that's always done before you've, that's always done in those years. And you should have responsibility for that. Yes, the same Sturgeon who says we aren't mature until age 25, so we can't be held accountable for our decisions. Now, Stephen says there it's about the coming council elections which are coming up. He says, why is Alba standing so few candidates? Only 6 out of 70 seats in Aberdeenshire. Well, I should imagine it's simply because they don't have the numbers of people who want to support them. Most people who want a career in politics are naturally if you're a Scottish nationalist, you're going to be drawn to the main party, aren't you? So you're going to be drawn to the SNP. So it's really only the fringe of the fringe who will join Alba. Now, talking about the council elections, which are on Thursday, the 5th of May, not long to go. The close of registration is Monday. That is, if you're not registered to vote, you want to be registered to vote by this Monday, the 18th of April. Now, you'll know that you're registered to vote if you've received a polling card. But if you've recently moved house or you've never voted before, or indeed if you're one of the 16-year-olds who's never voted before, you can vote, and you do need to register by Monday, and that's where you register online, gov.uk/register-to-vote by Monday the 18th of April. And it's important that everybody does, because remember that Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP have extended the franchise so widely. They've extended it beyond British citizens. They've extended it to simply people who happen to be resident in Scotland. So if you're only here for 6 months, you've come from abroad, and you're basically going in and out, you can vote. You have a say over what happens to people in this country, which I believe is completely wrong. Completely wrong. You should be a citizen of the nation before you can engage in its political affairs. That's a red line, as it were, for me on those particular matters. But the SNP and those sorts of Scottish nationalists, they don't care about trying to keep things in that particular way. They just want to basically open the vote to everybody that they can pander to. So that's part of it. It's, here's a new demographic that we can pander to. They can't vote, well, give them the vote then. That's the way they're looking at it. So in the face of that, if you're a British citizen and you're not voting, please, I do ask you to consider the wisdom of that and to vote, to use your vote. And there'll be somebody that you can vote for. And remember, this time you're voting in order. You get as many votes as you want, and you number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, in your order of preference. But you do not have to vote for everybody, and we strongly, strongly advise that you do not vote SNP, you do not vote Green, who are, of course, even more hardline Scottish nationalists than the Scottish nationalists themselves, and you do not vote Alba, and you be very cautious about voting for any person who's standing as an independent candidate on their own behalf, unless you know who that person is, because a lot of these independent candidates will end up voting with the SNP or the Greens or Alba if they were to be elected to the council chambers. So you do not have to vote for everybody at the election, but you will have several votes, and you can vote for as many as you want. So we say just vote for the pro-UK parties in your order of preference. Alan says it just takes one 16-year-old to influence hundreds of 16-year-olds to vote for the SNP. Well, that's true, isn't it? If they did have a 16-year-old candidate, and the SNP will go out the way to get a 16-year-old candidate, and then they'll get the mass media to big up this 16-year-old who will then be pretending to speak to all the other 16-year-olds and have some sort of unique insight into how it feels like to be a 16-year-old, because none of us have been 16 before. So they'll get that person to then appeal to all the 16-year-olds, won't they? We have faith, though. We have faith that the great British 16-year-old is far more intelligent and far more capable and will not be taken in by that sort of crass propaganda that the SNP will surely throw at us. Here's hoping, and here's working towards believing that at the end of the day. Good to hear Ernest from Buenos Aires in Argentina. Kimberly says, Chris McElhenney is my local Alba stooge. Yeah. Well, we know who he is, of course. The Alba people are very much a, what's the word? The phrase, they're very much, a certain type of person. And to be frank with you, some of what they say is actually more intelligent what the mainstream SNP is saying, as far as those kind of people go, as far as those ideas go, the more old school in some ways, the Alba people. And I'm glad to see them out there. I'm glad that they're splitting the Scottish nationalist vote. I think that's fantastic. It's the best thing that Alex Salmond's done in a very long time. MYM says the SNP don't love Scotland. They don't love Scotland as much as we Unionists do, because if they loved Scotland as much as we Unionists do, they would realise that the future of Scotland, Scotland's prosperity and greatness is going to be assured within the Union. And outside the Union, Scotland is going to struggle. More about that later in the programme. Kenny says the Glasgow cabbie doing a great job regarding the child sex survey. We should all support him. Glasgow cabbie is the name given to a fellow who's organising a campaign against basically what the SNP is doing regarding asking children very strange paedophiliac type questions. And he's the Glasgow cabbie man. He's seen it for what it is, and he's calling it out. And more power to his elbow. Kimberly says, my son's pretty based and he's only 18. Absolutely, there's plenty of 16 and 18-year-olds who are more politically conscious and aware than many people who are 61 or 81. And that's true, and we wouldn't knock young people for being young, as it were, because we've always been aware of that, especially nowadays as well with the internet. A young person can learn, if they want to, they can learn very fast. They can absorb an entire topic that might have taken you and I 10 years to learn. They can absorb it in a few minutes from a Wikipedia page. And so we live in a strange world at the moment where the degree of learning, where it's so easy to learn if you want to learn, to an extent that's never been the case in human history before. And so people can come along very fast in their awareness of things, whatever those sorts of things may be. And that especially includes young people as well. Alistair says, this is interesting. I'm at uni and there's no big support here for the SNP. Most of my classmates aren't even planning to vote. As from tomorrow, postal votes are being sent out. So many of you will no doubt receive the first batch of postal votes, which have been sent out between the 14th and the 18th. And back at the very first Scottish election, back in 1999, 1 in 100 people in Scotland were registered to vote by post. And it's now something like 1 in 4, which is a huge change in the political culture. And postal voting, won't get into it too much just now, but it's not something that we approve of because it's not really democratic. It has sacrificed ease of voting for a lot of things which are ultimately anti-democratic. And we wrote an article on that last year, which you'll find in the links, about the undemocratic nature of postal voting. And I'll just give you a for instance. Many people tomorrow, if they get their postal vote, they'll vote for the party that they had planned on voting for. However, 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, just before the actual election, they'll discover a new party, a small party, an independent candidate, that they would be like, oh, I wish I had voted for that person. I didn't know about that person 3 weeks ago when I voted. So postal voting only helps the big established parties. It doesn't help the small fringe parties or the individuals who are standing as candidates, because these people have a hard time getting their message out and making sure people know about them. And these people need all that time of the campaign to be heard and to get their message out and to go round all the houses. So they need the full period of the campaign to be heard and to get known about. And so if the system says, oh, just you can vote now, you can vote like almost 3 weeks before the actual election, then what it's actually doing is it's compromising the chances of that poor individual who's standing as an independent or who's standing for a fringe party. So it's like a trick as well. It's an anti-democratic trick, postal voting. And you get blooming idiots, quite frankly, who say, oh, it increases the turnout. At what expense? At what expense does it increase the turnout? At the expense of democracy. And so we're totally opposed to postal voting, but we're stuck with it. We're stuck with it. And that's before you even go into the dangers of fabricating votes and the pressure upon certain people as well, because there's nothing that can beat the privacy of a polling booth and the security of the ballot box. These, you can vote without any kind of pressure, whether it's from spouses, partners, friends, flatmates, whatever. There's all those pressures that are going to be building in on you if you're doing it by post. And some people will be affected by that. However, if you go into the privacy of the ballot box, the polling booth, nobody can see what you voted for, and then you put it in the ballot box, and you know it's going to get counted. You put it into a post box, you're taking your chances. Is it even going to see where it's meant to go at the end of the day? And how do you even know that your vote's been registered? You don't. So the whole thing just stinks to high heaven. But it's the way the world's going, unfortunately, and it's unfortunately the way the Western world is going as the system attempts to find ways of controlling us ever more effectively and essentially just dominating us. But as I say, we must remain positive and keep the light shining, keep the candle burning for the future. Kiyoshi says, how I vote is between me and the ballot box. Long live democracy. Absolutely. Sue makes a point that she doesn't really want to go to the polling station in her particular part of town. There used to be, you had to apply for a postal vote. For example, if you live in a geographically isolated area, of course you need to vote by post. If you are frail and you can't get about, again, you need to vote by post. If you have a job, as many people do, that's very awkward hours, and say you work night shift or so on, then again, of course, you do need a postal vote. And all of these people were able to get postal votes, but they had to fill in a special form and give their reason why. Nowadays, though, we've got what's called postal voting on demand. That's the term that's used, postal voting on demand. So anybody can just get a postal vote without having to have any kind of particular reason for it. Now, on this day in British history, quite a few things happened on this day in British history, and what we always like to do, of course, is give a Scottish spin to the overall British context. And it was on this day that the Scotsman who founded the English Football League was born. And his name was William McGregor. And he was born on the 13th of April in 1846. And he served as a draper in Perth, and then he followed his brother to Birmingham in 1870, where he was to become closely associated with Aston Villa all his life. And we'll put that pic back up there again of him. That's the pic of his statue outside the Aston Villa Stadium. That's William McGregor, born in Braco, Braco, in Perthshire in 1846, and he was to become closely associated with football, and he was the founder of the English Football League. Would you believe that? The English Football League, founded by that fellow there, William McGregor, with a nice statue to him. Now, also on this day, 13th of April in 1912, the Royal Flying Corps was established. Now, this was the flying arm of the army at the time. It's called the Royal Flying Corps. In 1912, 2 years before the outbreak of World War I. The first ever commander of the Royal Flying Corps was David Henderson. We've got a picture of him there, and that's him in an early Royal Flying Corps flying device, which quite frankly doesn't look particularly safe, but of course, as we know, it came on in leaps and bounds. And he was a Glaswegian. He was born in Glasgow, and he was the first commander of the Royal Flying Corps, formed on this day. And then what happened in a few years later, the Royal Flying Corps, which was the Army Flying Corps, and then the Navy Flying Corps, they joined together and they formed the RAF. 1st of April 1918, the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Naval Air Service joined together and they created the Royal Air Force, the world's first independent air force. And what else on this day? Oh, goodness me. In 1868, there was a big battle in Abyssinia, which is northern Ethiopia these days, and British hostages had been taken in Abyssinia, which were being held by an Ethiopian emperor. He had imprisoned a group of British subjects in this fortress in the middle of Abyssinia, which is like 400 miles inland. And so what the British did was they sent a task force from Bombay in India, sailed across the sea, landed in Africa, and tramped 400 miles inland with, according to a book we've got here in the office, 13,000 men of the British Indian Army, 26,000 camp followers, 13,000 mules, 13,000 sheep, 7,000 camels, 7,000 bullocks, 1,000 donkeys, and 44 elephants. They tramped all the way to this guy's mountain fortress to free these British subjects. It's fair to say that was, once they got there, the poor old emperor must have been shocked for a start, and it's fair to say that, I mean, it was a bit of a turkey shoot, quite frankly. And needless to say, all the hostages were freed very quickly. There was no casualties on the British side, but apparently hundreds of his Ethiopian warriors went to meet their maker, which was unfortunate for them. And the emperor himself, rather than surrender, shot himself. So a bad day very much for the Abyssinian emperor and his soldiers, and somewhat of a victory for the British and the British Indian Army, who went all the way out there to Abyssinia to free the hostages. But those were the days when those sorts of things were done. I was looking at an article about this afternoon, and do you know, I'm always sceptical about numbers and figures, and it said that the Ethiopian emperor had 30,000 soldiers, and I cannot believe that for a fact. What are 30,000 soldiers doing up in a rock fortress? I mean, I know, you know, we count these Scottish nationalist marchers, and they always say, oh, there was 250,000 of them, and we count them, and there's like 11,000. So I always say to people, when you read those stories about old battles, always be skeptical about the numbers, because basically these are, you can. It's likely the numbers of dead can be counted, but the numbers of soldiers on both sides, you have to be skeptical of that sometimes, because sometimes it just doesn't seem like it's likely when you think about it. So these are things that happened on this day. And what also happened, the Stone of Destiny had been nicked by some Scottish nationalist fruitcakes, basically. This was back in, was it in the 50s? Anyway, it was returned today. It was found in Arbroath Abbey on this day, the Stone of Destiny, and it was returned to its place under the throne at Westminster Abbey on the 13th of April 1951, Yeah, the Stone of Destiny returned to Westminster Abbey after being found at Arbroath Abbey. And now, of course, what the Stone of Destiny, they've taken the Stone of Destiny away from the throne, and it's in Edinburgh Castle, which we don't agree with, because the artefact is the throne and the stone together. And if you're going to move the stone about, you should move the throne about with it. A rather subtle constitutional point, but important enough for us to mention it. Reunite the Stone of Destiny with the coronation chair on that page there of policies regarding the monarchy. And that's in our magazine, Do More Together, which is only a fiver, 102 policies, 102 ways to keep the United Kingdom united. Please get yours today. It keeps us going, folks. It's definitely what keeps us going. Richard says regarding the Stone of Destiny, she never removed it from Westminster. No, it was a silly attempt to try to appeal to some sort of, to whom was it trying to appeal? You know, the Scottish nationalists are not interested in it. They didn't say thank you. The King's Stone in Kingston is a sight to see. Don't know about that, Nelson. Don't know what that is. That sounds interesting, though. And please send in your answer by email. Not in the comments. Next up is Busting Indy Myths Part 12. Now, as you know, we're assembling these Indy Myths in order that by the time we're finished assembling them, we'll have basically an encyclopedia of knowledge, an encyclopedia of knowledge that busts all the crazy separatist nonsense that we always hear. And under every letter that's written to the National, under every article that's written to the National, under everything that's spoken on television and radio, there's certain themes that feed into the Scottish separatist mentality. And as a consequence of these themes, a lot of nonsense is then explodes out of them. And one of the themes is that separation will improve the relationship between Scotland and England. So, Busting Indy Myths Part 12, we address the oft-heard myth that separation will improve relationships between Scotland and England. We often hear it said that separation will improve relationships between Scotland and England and will somehow allow us to treat each other as equals. Their attitude is summed up as in, we're not getting on right now and we're not doing the things that we could do together, but we'll get on with England and we'll do more together when we separate and when we're apart. And this is an underlying theme in much of their written and spoken work. We'll be able to deal with each other as equals, but we're not able to deal with each other as equals right now. That's nonsense. The reality is that separation will not make the heart grow fonder. Indy will not make the heart grow fonder. It will only make the heart grow colder. If the heart is not fond right now, it's not going to be fond after separation. If you're not doing things together right now, you're not going to be doing things together after separation. So we have to ask, where does this attitude come from? Where does this belief come from? And it's because the people who say these things, they themselves believe themselves right now to be put upon. They believe themselves right now to be oppressed. They believe themselves right now to be held back, often by a foreign country. And so they believe that if they got somehow freedom from this, then there's going to be some kind of rebirth of their heart. And they're going to then look upon their previous oppressors with forgiveness and mercy. And they're going to be able somehow, in their magnanimity, to get along. It's not how things work. But that's what leads them to believe that post-separation, things will somehow be better. And related to this belief that there'll be the relationship will be better, they also believe that they'll be able to do more things together as well. And there was a good example of this from an SNP MP. This was last year, and he was quoting from somebody's article. And there's Stuart MacDonald there at the bottom. He says, if the Scots, and he's quoting, if the Scots vote for independence, then emerging, I don't know what that means, new UK should aspire to be the best friend and ally of an independent Scotland and seek close links with it. Geography, common values and self-interest would demand no less. And we've responded, right now, it's that the SNP are basically saying right now we're not best friends or allies and we don't want close links despite geography, common values and self-interest. But after we've split, we'll be best friends and allies and seek close links, especially because of geography, common values and self-interest. How absurd. How absurd. How absurd to break our close links and then say that the first thing we will do after separation is to seek close links again. We already have the close links, but they're saying what we need to do is to separate and then immediately seek close links because our geography, our common values and our self-interest demands it. That's just absurd behaviour. That's an absurd thing to say, but that's how they're thinking. That's how they're thinking. So, to conclude, if you're the sort of person who is not getting on right now with England and the English, then separation is not going to make your heart grow fonder. Separation is going to make your heart grow colder. Separation is not going to solve your attitude towards England and the English right now. It will only make it worse. So what you need to do is basically have a change of heart. That's what's ultimately it's about, is a change of heart. If you're not doing things with England and the English right now, you're not going to be doing anything with them after separation either. Okay, so don't try to kid yourself. Don't try to kid yourself that external circumstances will somehow change what is actually an issue of your own heart. If you're not treating the English as equals right now, you're not going to be treating the English as equals after separation. And basically, their attitude is summed up in this cartoon, which really is a fantastic cartoon, and which was put together by a colleague of ours about 10 years ago. Unionism versus separatism. How Unionists see the past, Scotland and England warring against each other, and how Unionists see the present, Scotland and England friendly with each other within and under the Union Jack. And what we propose for the future is moving forward behind our flag of unity. But look at how the separatists see the past. Like ourselves to an extent, we understand there was war against each other, but look how they see the present. They see the present as England pressing Scotland under the flag of the Union. And in the future, that's what it will be like after separatism. Scotland still remaining suspicious of England. So we are the top row, and the nationalists, unfortunately, are the bottom row. The answer, as we always say, is to do more together right now while we are in the Union. To build on our close links right now, to accept the fact of our geography, our common values, and our self-interest, and to realise that all of these things make it sensible that we stay in union and we stay together. Because as we always say, we have more in common than what divides us, and so it makes sense for our political institutions to reflect that fact. And as we always say, this is our key message in this special policy edition of Union Heart. And if you don't have a copy, you really are missing out. We always suggest to people, buy 2 copies. It's only a £5. Buy 2 copies, send one to your local legislator, whether MSP or MP. And you'll be able to not just get some really good ideas for the Union, but you'll also be keeping us going, keeping this fantastic message and show alive. And talking of which, our summer activism campaign. Now this is important. This year is, of course, the Queen's 70th Jubilee, 70 years on the British throne. And as a pro-monarchy organisation, we've been given thought into how best to celebrate that and to integrate it into our work this year, while at the same time continuing to campaign for the Union. And what we've decided upon is to have a campaign of what we're calling Jubilee street stalls. Now, these will be, at the moment, we've got 10 planned, 10 street stalls. The first is this Saturday, the 16th of April. And the stall itself will be decorated with a couple of Jubilee flags, and as usual, we'll be collecting signatures, and we'll have a selection of our magazines and wee books and so on, which will be available for a donation. And so the first Jubilee street stall is this Saturday. There'll be another in May, and there'll be 4 in the Jubilee month of June, and there'll be at least 1 a month to the end of the year, or certainly into the autumn anyway. if you'd like to join with us in that very positive, very educational street activism, then simply do send us a message via contact@aforceforgood.uk. What we'll also be doing by the time that June comes along is we'll have a special edition of our magazine Union Heart, which will be all about Scotland and the monarchy. And it will be answering some of the Republican complaints about the monarchy, and it will be promoting the monarchy from a Scottish perspective, from the Scottish angle. And so we'll be talking about the Union of the Crowns, and we'll be talking about those elements of our Scottish history. We'll be talking about how the Queen is a direct descendant of Robert the Bruce. We'll have a whole page dedicated to that. We'll have a whole page dedicated to debunking the oft-heard Scottish nationalist nonsense that somehow the national anthem has an anti-Scottish verse in it. That's all just rubbish. So we'll be laying it out there as well. So that's another educational tool that we'll have. So it's going to be a good period of action. And if you want to stand with us, please come along. Contact us at contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we'll tell you where we're having these street stalls and so on. Now, you don't need to talk to the public. What we're really just asking is just come along and say hello and stand with us. If you're in the centre of town, come along, stand with us for 20 minutes, stand with us for half an hour. That really does help to boost the morale of our experienced table team that's dealing with the public. So something that you can do if you're in town, and many of these will be in Glasgow, then just come along, say hello, and stand with us. And so if you'd like to stand with us, contact us at aforceforgood.uk, contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we will tell you where to see us, and we will look forward to meeting you. So the first one is this Saturday, and definitely looking forward to that. That's going to be a good summer of activism because it's a positive thing we can do, and it's educational at the same time, and it's flying the flag, and it's showing that Scotland loves the monarchy. Scotland loves the Queen, and we'll generate some good photos from that as well. That'll be good. And we'll do a live this Saturday as well from the actual event. We'll do a short live broadcast that will be going out on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter also. Kyoshi says, am I right in understanding that without the British government, UK's approval, Scotland can have no legal referendum? Yep, that's most certainly the way that it works. And it has to work like that because you can't have one part of the United Kingdom on its own deciding to break up the rest of the United Kingdom without the say-so of the central British government. Michael says, their aims will be impossible. SNP aims will be impossible as they cannot have everything with everyone. The best thing for Scotland is to be in the UK. Bill says, for a so-called inclusive nation, the SNP shout a lot about separation and exclusion. Don't they just? Don't they just? Bill says, will you stream from the stall? We will do a short 10-minute live stream, Bill. Absolutely. We'll tell you how we're getting on as well. We always get, in Glasgow, the centre of Glasgow, we always get lots of good support. Lots of good people. Always happy to see us. Sue says, they will be more suspicious of the English if they separated, as they won't have any input in government and they wouldn't have so much inside knowledge. That's right. Because at the moment, the Scottish nationalist MPs, they are part of the wider British political establishment. And they are included in everything that goes on. And that's the way it should be, given our geography, given our common interests, given our self-interest, given our common values. It's absolutely essential that they are part of that wider British political establishment. But excluded from that, again, that's, as you say, quite rightly, Sue, that's just going to lead to suspicion. What are they up to? Again, it would be just like going back 400 or 500 years. Well, that's great. That's great, folks. It's the top of the hour. At 1 hour went very quickly. Thank you so much for all the comments. We had quite a few watching across all our platforms tonight, and we do appreciate all the points of view all our supporters, and including those who have still to be brought into the truth, such as some of the people on TikTok. We do appreciate those of you who don't agree with us, and we do hear everything that you say, and we do see everything that you say, and it does make us think, and hopefully what we say on this program will also help you guys on TikTok to also see the truth of what we're saying, and the positivity and the optimism of going forward as part of our United Kingdom. But folks, we'll be back next week at the same time, 7 o'clock, across all our digital platforms, broadcasting worldwide. So thank you to everybody who has contributed tonight, and it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen. See you next week.